Hi, this is Tammy Foreman with Path Forward. I'm the Executive Director. I'm super excited to have you here today for our webinar, Crafting Your Career Restart Strategy. Hopefully that's the webinar you signed up for. If not, you're in the wrong webinar. I'm really excited for this session today. This is the second, not the second, this is a series of webinars that we've done. And we have recordings available. So if you missed some of our earlier webinars on returnships and restarting your technical career, acing your returnship interview, we will send those links to you as part of the follow-up from this. But today we're going to be talking about your career restart plan. So really quickly, for those of you who may be new to Path Forward, maybe have just joined us within the last few weeks or months, Path Forward is a nonprofit organization. We are on a mission to empower people who've taken time off for caregiving to restart their careers. And we do that by working with a number of great employers, including Walmart and Amazon and many wonderful employers that we work with to create returnship programs. But today, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about returnships. As I mentioned, we have done a webinar on that. So if you want more information about what a returnship is, how to think about it as part of your career restart strategy, highly recommend you check out the Returnship 101 webinar that we've done. And we'll send you some more information from our site that you can read. But today, and before I get to today's topic, we've got 3 more webinars coming up, 3 more virtual events that are coming up in June, July, and August. Next week, we will be doing a recruiting event with VMware. So if you're looking for returnships, if you are interested in restarting your career at VMware, highly recommend that you sign up for that as soon as the announcement goes out. It should go out today. We'll definitely include the link to that event in the follow-up from today's webinar. And then on July 22nd, we're going to be doing a webinar on pivot potential. Is changing your career the best way to restart? So that's going to be our next in this sort of monthly series. And then in August, we're going to be announcing a topic soon, and we'll have sign-up forms for all of those as they are announced. But today's topic is about creating a plan for yourself. And I am going to be joined after a few minutes of giving you some general information by 2 of Path Forward's star alumni. So they'll be joining me in about 20-25 minutes, and they'll tell their stories and talk about their planning process and also answer your questions. So I'm really excited to have them here, and I think you're going to really enjoy hearing their stories. So I will let them introduce themselves and talk about themselves after we get through the first part of our webinar today. So when I think about the many people I've talked to over the last couple of years and the hundreds of women that have come up to me at events, sent in emails to Path Forward, right, and reached out to us, it's daunting, right? There is the going back to work process for a lot of people is daunting. And there's a way in which you think, okay, I want to go back to work, so what should I do? Well, I need to update my resume, I'll go look at some job boards, and I'll apply for some jobs. And that's daunting because, first of all, updating the resume when you've been out of work for a few years or more than a few years, that in itself just feels like pushing a boulder up a hill, like, oh my gosh. And it brings up all kinds of questions, right? There's all kinds of like, okay, I need to update my resume. Well, should I include positions from like 10 or 20 years ago? Is that still relevant? Where do I put the information about my volunteer leadership? Should I include that? Should I not include that? How am I going to cover my gap? What am I going to do about that? And then as you start looking for jobs on sites like Indeed and LinkedIn and all the many places that you can find job listings, it becomes like, okay, how do I figure out what level of job to apply for, right? Is this going to be a good company for me? Oh my gosh, what do I put down for salary requirements? I have to fill something in there. So a lot of people just kind of get stuck, and then it's like, okay, now what? So I would like to propose to you a framework that has you doing things in a little bit of a different way, and helps you to create and develop a strategy for yourself of how you're going to get back into the workforce. And this is going to work for you whether you're looking for full-time jobs, returnships, freelance opportunities, contracting projects. It doesn't matter. This is about taking a bigger approach to getting back into the workforce and getting back to what you love to do, or figuring out what you'd like to do next. So I'm going to talk about 3 things today before we get to our panel. I'm going to talk about building your network. I'm going to talk about creating a target list of companies, so taking a strategic approach to the companies that we're going to reach out to, and then applying for jobs, and give you some real specific advice on how to do that. So I start with building your network because I think there's nothing more important when you are restarting your career to get connected to people and talk to them so that you can get information. So when I talk about networking in any of these events, when I'm in a live event, I can see people's shoulders kind of slump and like, oh my gosh, I really was hoping she was going to say anything but networking. Like, I really hope she was going to talk about anything else, anything else, anything else. And I think there's a couple reasons why people hate networking. One reason I think they hate networking is because this is how they imagine it, right? And this feels like the before time. Like this actually is making me a little twitchy to look at all these people so close together and none of them are wearing masks. But this is what we've always thought about as networking, right? Like being in a room full of people we don't know, having to introduce ourselves, trying to figure out what to say. And then the other way we think about networking, which is also hard, whether it's talking to someone we know or don't know, is like, basically, can you give me a job, right? Can you give me a job? Can you give me a job? And asking for a job makes us feel very vulnerable, and it makes the other person uncomfortable, and then the whole thing just feels daunting. So I would like to make you love networking, and the way I'm going to make you love networking is by helping you think about it in a completely different way, which is, it's not about talking to people that you don't know and introducing yourselves to strangers at cocktail parties, if we ever get to go to those ever again. And it's not about even asking for a job or a thing. It's about getting information. It's about talking to people that you already know, getting to introduce to people they know, so you get introduced to someone with some context. And then it's about learning about the marketplace, about careers and skills and experiences and companies, and getting the information that you need to move forward in a strategic way. So here's some things that you can learn, right? So when you're asking for information instead of a job, these are the kinds of things that you can learn. How your skills can be applied in a new area. What skills are most desired in a given field? If you are missing skills, or there are things that are new to your industry, where's the best place to learn about that? Is there an online course you can take? Are there other experiences that you get to develop those skills? What companies are hiring and where are they hiring in? What is the company that you work for like as a company? What's the culture like? What do you love about it? What do you find challenging about it, right? So I think when people have been out of the workforce, particularly those who've been out longer, so we tend to see people on average when they come into a Path Forward returnship, they've been out about 6.5 years, but I think when you've been out for 7, 8, 10 years, things like that, it feels like, well, I don't know, I don't have a network anymore, right? That's, people tell me all the time, well, I don't really have a network anymore. Everyone I worked with is gone. They maybe have retired even, like I don't. So I want to give you 3 quick pieces of advice, easy ways to build your network right now where you are. So what I want you to do is start with the people that you already know. And you already know a lot of people, right? So this is not just about like everyone you've ever worked with. You certainly should reach out to anyone you've ever worked with if you think that they can be helpful to you now. But it doesn't matter. It's everyone you know, right? If your kids are in school, if they're in activities, if you volunteer in your community, if you are part of a faith group, whether it's a church, a mosque, a synagogue, right? Like there are people you already know who you can, in the context of the work you're doing with them, the interactions that you already have with them, hey, I am restarting my career. I'm really excited. I'm a little nervous. I'm trying to talk to people about what they're doing, what their experiences are, so I can get a sense of what's out there in the marketplace. This is a great time to be having those conversations because you can even frame it as, hey, I know your company's probably not hiring right now. I know a lot of companies aren't hiring, so I'm really just trying to get some information. I'm just trying to find out what kinds of jobs are out there. It's been a while since I worked, and I'm just trying to get some information. Would love to get 20 minutes on a Zoom with you. If I could ask you a few questions, I'd really appreciate it. And you start with the people who are in your immediate circle, right? The people who you feel comfortable having that conversation. And then you end every one of those conversations with like, okay, now who should I meet? Who's the next person I should talk to? Is there someone else at your company? Hey, is there specifically someone at your company in this department that I'm interested in? Because I'd love to learn more about that. And that's how you grow your circle slowly over time. Another way to build your network is actually to take a class. You can do this right now in the now time online, and there are online classes that do allow for interaction among people taking the class. So if your goal is to meet some people and do some networking, you're going to want to look for courses that allow that have some kind of small group component, ideally if they have Zooms attached to them, where you can do some live sessions. It's okay if some of the work is offline because that's usually how online classes are constructed, but you want something that at least has some opportunity for you to meet some people. Certainly when things start to really open up and we can go back to doing things like that, classes are a great way to meet people and to meet people who have a mutual interest. And you will meet people in classes who are looking to make career changes, who are looking, who are also looking to restart, but also people who are working at a company but looking to gain new skills in order to move up in their career. So it's a place where you're gonna meet people. If you aren't already involved in your community in some way, volunteering is a great way to get to know people and get to know people in a way that allows for those kinds of conversations. And hey, what do you do? And I'd love to learn more about that. I'm making a change in my career. I'm going back to work after being home for a while. Would love to talk to you and learn more about what you do. So these are some ways to build your network where you are right now, right? Even if you feel like your prior professional network feels a little bit unreachable, although I will challenge you on that notion because I think you can reach out to anyone you've ever worked with and have exactly this kind of conversation as well. And you will be surprised how receptive people will be. Okay, sip of water. Next. All right, so we're building our network. We're having all these conversations. And then the next thing we're doing is we're creating a target list of companies. If you have any sales background or have interacted with salespeople in any way in your career or in your life, this will seem like a very familiar concept in that context, but less so in the job hunting context. So I want to bring this idea of targeting companies and being focused on the kinds of companies you want to work for and bring that into your job search. Most importantly, what I want you to do is I want you to stay off job boards. Job boards are the worst. They are where dreams go to die. They're full of dreck and nonsense, and it's hard to figure out if the jobs are even real and if they're appropriate for you. It's very title-based, which is not at all a helpful way to think about jobs. One example I have of this, of how I think this is not really helpful, is back when I was in corporate marketing, I was hiring a PR director, and this was in New York City, which is where I am, and I would get all these resumes with people who had, 5 and 10 years of experience, which is what we were looking for, but in pharmaceutical PR. We were looking for a PR manager, and there's a big pharmaceutical industry in New Jersey, you might know, so a lot of people are like, oh, PR manager, PR director, whatever the title was at the time, and would apply for it. And it's like, well, I'm selling software to other marketing people. I don't need someone who knows how to sell drugs to doctors. That's not helpful. The publications they pitch to are not my publication. Like, there was nothing about their specific experience other than it happened to be public relations that was relevant. So they were just wasting my time and their time. So job boards are not helpful. What you want to be focused on is companies. Where are the companies that you want to work for? And how do you figure that out? So we're going to figure that out. Sorry, my mouse is a little bit. We're going to figure that out by thinking about what it is in a company that we're looking for. So I actually think for a lot of people, you should start with connections, right? So build out a list of, and I would recommend most people, you probably want to start with a bigger list, but you ultimately want to get to somewhere between 20 and 30 companies that you're focused on, that you are laser focused on trying to find a job at. And I recommend you start with the companies who your connections work for, because you automatically have a way to get to those companies. Now, some of those are going to be inappropriate. You're going to figure out pretty quickly. They're not in your industry. They don't have jobs that are going to be appropriate for you, but you're going to start there. You're also going to think about the culture of the company and the mission and the purpose. Like, is it something that's going to get you excited? I also highly recommend people look at proximity. There are a few things that will make you more miserable than a long commute. So, looking at the the radius around your house, what are the next 3 train stops, or what are the companies that are within a reasonable commute from your house, right? And focusing on them. Some of them are going to be appropriate and some of them are not, but you start there and start researching them and figuring out, is this a company that looks like I'd want to work there? What kinds of things do they hire for? Do I have the skills that they're looking for? Do I have skills that could transfer into the kinds of things that they're looking for? So we're going to get our network together. We're going to build out this list of between 20 and 30 companies, and then we're going to start applying for jobs. So this is your step-by-step guide to how to apply for jobs at your target companies. Now, I want to emphasize the fact that we're not going out on the web and randomly clicking on links and applying to them. That's not what we're doing. But we are going to some of the, here's a couple places where those job boards can actually be helpful. They're really great at helping you create job alerts. So you can go on to all the services and set up job alerts. You want to set up job alerts for companies. Do not, I'm going to repeat, do not set up a job alert for your job title. That is going to just get you a bunch of noise and things that are not going to be at all relevant to you, right? You're going to get a bunch of PR managers at jobs you're not qualified to be a PR manager at. So you're going to set up a job alert for the companies that you're following, right? The 25, 30, maybe if you want to add a few more to expand your reach, but you're going to set up job alerts for the companies that you're following. When you see a role come across at one of those companies, you're going to reach out to the people you know at that company because of your networking and see if they know anything about the role. Any information that you can get ahead of applying is going to be super helpful to you. Then you're going to update your resume and write a pitch cover letter. And what I mean by that is you're going to write a cover letter that shows that you've done research about this company, you know about this company, you think it's the perfect company for you because of these reasons. You're going to, in your cover letter, very briefly explain that you've been out of the workforce and you're looking to restart and super excited about this opportunity because I did this before and I've been doing this while I've been out of the workforce and now I'm ready to do this, right? So you're going to really make that pitch for yourself in that cover letter. You are going to submit your resume online, right? So you are going to go through that process. I think there's a lot of, frankly, not great advice out there about like trying to avoid the online application process altogether, and you don't actually want to do that. You want to be in the system because for most companies, that's how the recruiting department and the hiring managers manage their workflow. So if you have not submitted your resume online through their career portal or through whatever system they're using, you will get lost, even if you have a contact. But you are also going to send that resume and cover letter to the person in your network who can put it on the right desk. So the person who is closest to the person hiring. Now, in some cases, that might not be very close. If it's a big company, your contact may be over here. That's okay. That's still going to get you closer to where you want to be than just hitting apply online and hoping for the best. And then you're going to follow up. And when you get an interview, you're going to follow up with their contacts to find out if they have any insights, what can they tell you about the process, and you're going to just keep doing that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time now talking about resumes. We are thinking about doing a future session on resumes. But there is a study that the Ladders did in 2018. So it was a follow-up to a study they did in 2012. In 2012, they found that recruiters on average spent about 6 point something seconds on a resume to determine fit. It's now up to 7.4 seconds, and this was back in 2018. So this was when the unemployment rate was at its absolute lowest it had ever been. So presumably the volume of resumes for a lot of positions had gone down for a lot of recruiters. So they were maybe spending an extra second, which is kind of shocking that it was only an extra second. But that means you're not getting a lot of time. You're not getting the time you need to tell your story. And I think it's also important to recognize when you're doing, when you're putting a resume together, the recruiters particularly, it's a little bit different for hiring managers, right? Which is why you want to try to get your resume passed on by someone you know. But the recruiters are really just looking at facts. They spend the most amount of time skimming, looking at your name, your current title and company, previous title and company, start and end dates, and education, right? The basic facts of the resume. You can see very clearly from this heat map that they spend very little time on the bullet points, particularly as you move down to the lower bullet points. I think this is a powerful advertisement for doing less and writing less about each job, and just focusing on a few top things that are really the most key. And finding other ways to get your foot in the door so that you can get into that interview, which is your opportunity to tell a bigger and more holistic story. And you know, the question I get asked the most often about resumes is about minding the gap. What do I do about the gap? What do I do? How do I cover it up? And my basic advice here is, you know, spending a lot of time trying to kind of hide over or paper over the fact that you've been out of the workforce makes it more obvious and actually makes it a little bit more prominent than it does anything else. And also, you've been out of the workforce. That's a fact. And there isn't anything that you can do to your resume that's going to make it get through the ATS system, past the recruiter who's screening out for that, and get it to the right person, other than working through your network and figuring out ways to get connected to people who are willing to give you a hearing and really kind of take a look and dive under. Now, you certainly should take credit for any work that you've been doing of all kinds while you've been out of the workforce. If you've done freelance and consulting work, you should absolutely put that at the top of your resume and talk about what you've learned from that. If you've had significant volunteer experiences, you should put that, depending on how relevant it is to the job you're applying for. If it's very relevant, you could certainly put it at the top. If it's less relevant, you can put it in a volunteer section and talk about it in that there. But I wouldn't worry so much about trying to hide your gap as I would spend that energy and time getting to know people who can pass you along and give you those opportunities. So then, this is not like a linear process, right? It's not like, check, I built my network, check, I created my target list, check, I applied for jobs. This is a continuous process. You are going to keep going back to your network and getting more information And as you apply for jobs and some things work out and some things, it becomes clear that that's not the right company for you, you move them off the list and you move another company onto the list. So this is an iterative process that you're going through. Sorry about that. And then lastly, before we get to our panelists, who I'm very excited for, the biggest thing about a career restart plan is to be consistent and sustainable and create a routine for yourself where you're doing some pieces of each part of what I've talked about today every day and every week. That is going to give you the results that you're looking for. It's like exercise, it's like eating healthy, it's like anything, right? The consistency of the habit. You do not need to spend 8 hours a day. You probably don't have 8 hours a day right now. That's not what you need to do. You could spend an hour in the morning reaching out to a bunch of people, maybe another hour at lunch, after lunch, when everybody's energy is a little low and you can send them off on their iPads, and maybe another hour after dinner. If you do that every single day, 5 days a week, that's 15 hours a week. You can reach out to, at least 1 or 2 people a day. You can research at least one company or one piece of a company, right? You can probably research in depth 2 or 3 companies a week, and you can do applications for at least really good substantive applications for 2 or 3 jobs a week. Do that consistently, week after week after week. That's going to get you where you want to go. So I recommend this book, 50 Ways to Get a Job. I love this book so much. It's literally on my bookshelf above me. I have read it and I recommend it at every one of these. It's where I got some of the ideas in here. So that will help you if you want more ideas of how to think about this in a strategic way and a planful way, buy this book. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to our amazing star alumni who will introduce themselves now.
Thank you, Tammy, so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Schober, and I live in Cupertino, California, with my husband and 2 teenage sons. And my background is in enterprise software sales and marketing. I have over a decade of experience selling to internet companies all the way to Fortune 100 companies. And before I became pregnant with my first son, the internet bubble burst, and my internet company I was working for shut down. And so I remained home, had my first son, and 2.5 years later, my second son arrived. And I turned to being a dedicated full-time mom, managing the household. And when the boys were in elementary school, I started strategic volunteering because I realized sometime in the future I wanted to go back to work. So I sat on the board at PTA, of the Homeowners Association, did some civic work with my city. And then when my son, the youngest, was well settled into middle school and I happened to turn 50, I said, hey, it's time for me to relaunch my career. Why wait? And so that began a 16.5-month journey of career relaunch journey. And in September of 2018, I was delighted to land a Path Forward returnship at Sage Intact. It's a cloud-based financial management software company in San Jose, California. And about 14 weeks into that 16-week returnship, based on the skills that I was displaying to my manager and the quality of my work product, the company created a full-time position for me, which was a thrill. And then I was in that position for about 5 months. And then I had a VP encourage me to apply for a more senior position. And I did that, and I was promoted to Sales Enablement Program Manager about a year ago. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Deepthi Parthasarathy, and I'm a senior product manager with Walmart Labs. And I was, in fact, part of the first cohort of returnees at Walmart Labs. Come September, actually, it's going to be close to 2 years since I joined. I have my background and my engineering degree in computer science, and over 12 years of retail and supply chain domain experience. I started my career as a developer and then over time transitioned into product management. And when my daughter was about 2 years old, I decided to take a break to be with her as we relocated from Texas to California. And this was a conscious decision we had made as a couple when my daughter was born. So the first 2 years of my daughter's life, my husband actually stayed home with her. And later on, the next 4 years, I stayed with her until she was ready to go into first grade, which is when my whole returnship journey started, which I'm sure we'll talk about more in the upcoming time.
Awesome, awesome. Alicia, Deepthi, so excited to have you here. I'm going to turn the share off so people can see your loveliness. There we go. Great. So we've got some great questions, and I know Abby's going to ask some questions as well. But one that I just saw come across the chat, and I'd like you both to react to this because I'm going to react to it really quickly, which is, shouldn't you be, relationship building, not just trying to get to somebody's company? And yes, right, networking is about relationship building. And the whole reason you want to be focused on asking people about their experiences is you're trying to learn from them. And there may be ways for you to help them as well. But yeah, you do want to be able to create a network for yourself where you can then reach out and say, hey, I noticed this job is open at your company. Most people get referral bonuses, right? So there's not, it's not necessarily you're doing them a favor if you're a good candidate, but also coming back to this research question, like you're putting your resume in front of them when there's a job at that company that you think you're a good fit for. So you're giving them an opportunity to make that referral. But yes, you are building a relationship with them and going back and saying, hey, here's some other things I've learned. Hey, I just met somebody who you might like to know, right? So it's not just about taking, and that's why I want you to love networking, because it's not just about taking, it's also figuring out what you can give. Alicia, I know you have done this a lot, as have you, Deepthi, so I'd love to hear you talk about that as well.
Sure, thanks, Tammy. I'd like to talk a little bit how I approach networking. So if I didn't spell it out, I had an 18-year pause between working professionally, which is a pretty long pause. And when I started out my networking, I really was focused on my closest family and friends. So I had about 70 connections on LinkedIn and started talking to them because I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I encourage you with your networking to do, yes, like we heard, a lot of open-ended questions, ask people about what they do. People enjoy talking about themselves. Some job titles I didn't even recognize. They were kind of new to me because I had been out for so long. So I asked people what they do. And as I started to understand more what I wanted, then I went to phase 2 of my networking, and I literally pulled out the roster of the Boy Scout troop, which we had 200 parents on, my homeowners association address book, the PTA roster, the school address book, and I started going through it. And then I started building my connections, seeing where those people were working. Was I interested in working at a company like that, setting up informational interviews with them, and exploring more, what did I want to do with my relaunch? And as that story started to gel and I understood my values and the type of company I wanted to work for and my role through lots of thinking about this, then I had the third phase, which was reaching out to past colleagues. It had been a long time, but I rebuilt that network and had some great conversations with those people too and got their advice.
So Unfortunately, I wasn't that great at networking. I was late at the game and learned it the hard way. Uh, when I started my job search, I was looking at it more from, hey, I knew exactly where I wanted to be, right? Because all my experience was like in the supply chain domain and retail companies, which is what I was targeting. And all my previous experience with the companies that I had been at before and the folks that I knew from there, those were the ones I reached out to. But unfortunately, because I had relocated and the companies I'd worked for and the people who I'd worked with were all still back in Texas. So I did reach out to them, made an effort, but didn't translate into much. What I didn't realize is all these other ways that Tammy just talked through, the ways I could have gone about it, right? Which I learned later on in the game after I met Tammy. But nonetheless, I picked it up at that point, and that's helped me make that transition from once I joined Walmart, what I was as an attorney, as a product manager, but then making that shift within the company was mainly because of networking. So yeah, late in the game, but definitely valuable.
Excellent. Abby, do we have some questions from?
Yes, we sure do. A lot of really great questions coming in through the chat. And also thanks everyone for sending questions in when you registered for this event. So we're getting several questions about how do you justify your career gap? How did you talk about it in interviews? How do you put it on your resume? It pains me a little to see the word justify because, as Tammy said, it's nothing to apologize for, but would love your take. Alicia, if you want to go first.
Okay. So as I mentioned, when my boys were in elementary school, I wanted to start doing some more work outside of the house, but I wasn't ready to relaunch my career. So I started on a journey to do strategic volunteering. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I didn't necessarily just say, okay, I'll bake cookies for the bake sale. A strategic volunteering position might be, well, I think I'll manage all the donations coming in and schedule and make sure that we have enough throughout the bake sale type thing. So I thought about the skills that I wanted to keep fresh or develop, and looked for volunteer opportunities that would provide that kind of upskilling for me. So for example, I got approached to be on our homeowners association board of directors. So I thought that'll get me back in kind of like a business setting, and I'll remember how to learn, run meetings and do analysis and make recommendations and engage with people. And I also raised my hand. We didn't have a community website. So I said, I'll build the website. I didn't know how to build a website, but I thought I better understand these kind of things if I want to relaunch my career. So I taught myself how to do that. So I was, like I said, adding business skills by this volunteering. And when I wrote my resume, as I mentioned, an 18-year gap's pretty large, you know, that the last job was in the year 2000. I said, I can't start way back then. I've been doing really valuable work for the last decade. So under experience, I put the volunteer positions that aligned and showed the skills, demonstrated my capabilities to the type of work that I wanted to do. I'm a program manager, so I manage lots of projects. And I put those types of volunteer positions underneath experience, and I described them in business terms. So I had my problem and my action and the result. And that's what I recommend. I had the confidence to do that. Volunteer positions that maybe weren't directly related to where I wanted to relaunch into, I left those off, or I put them in a volunteer section lower in the resume.
I love that, Alicia. That is so awesome.
So essentially, from my standpoint, what I did when my daughter was in daycare, so she started going for about 2-3 hours a day and I wanted to keep myself busy outside of just being around it with her, have some adult conversations, see if I can make a buck on the side. So I kind of started a small business to keep my adult mind engaged, right? And also bring some money in on the way. So that kind of, how do I translate that into when I go back to the returnship, right? Or go back to the career if I'm joining back in the workforce. And then also, once my daughter was younger and I had to keep myself, have some free time to get things done, I started developing this skill on Alexa. And it was like a family project, right? So it was a skill that catered to young kids, like my daughter, that without screen time could keep her engaged for 30 or 40 minutes at a stretch while I get things done at the house. So how can I translate that into what it means at the back of the work, right? It brings my product management skills to work. It brings all of the soft skills that I learned during that time, people management, even negotiation skills, multitasking, all of these are required in your day-to-day work life. So how you look at your break, whether it is as time you took while you were still building up on the skill set that's required when you go back to work. And others see what you show them. So if you look at your break in a positive light, nothing to be ashamed of, like Abby was mentioning, and then show people how that translates, that becomes a plus point for you.
Great. We have plenty more questions. So we've got an interesting one that came through the registration form asking about level. And how did you know what kind of level to apply to, given your previous experience, but the gap, how did you navigate that? Alicia, if you want to start.
Okay. That was challenging. I had gone out as an individual contributor, but a manager level when I last worked. And I was applying to positions more that mid-level, and this was outside of returnship. It was just applying directly, and I wasn't getting that much traction. And I said, well, gosh, I think I'll have to dial it back a bit and maybe go one level down from that to get my foot in the door. So that's what I was setting myself up for. I happened to, so when I applied to the returnship position, I actually applied to more junior positions. And I thought, well, this is all right. I'll get my foot in the door and I'll work my way up. It's all right to go back at a little bit lower position. When I was in my interview with the hiring manager, she held up the program manager resume, or excuse me, the job posting, and she said, you know, actually, I really would like to consider you for this other position that I think you bring the perfect skills for. So I did end up relaunching into the same level I was at as a manager, but actually the skills, the level of work for that job was a bit junior, and that was actually fine with me because I was trying to get back into the flow of what it's like being in a company. Things changed a bit over 18 years. So what I decided to do is just take the opportunity to learn as much as I can. And I made a commitment to myself, especially because it was just 16 weeks long. I said, all my work products, I'm going to set the bar very high and create excellent work product. And that was demonstrated. And then when I was given the permanent position, we actually added more responsibilities to that job. And then, as I mentioned, I was encouraged to apply for a more senior position and was promoted within 5 months. So the lesson here is it's okay to go back at maybe a little bit lower level than you were at. You get your foot in the door. You're establishing your professional brand. It's really important to come out strong with that and keep aware of opportunities that present themselves within the company. Most companies want to keep really strong people within the company. They don't want to lose them.
Alicia, that's really great advice. Deepthi, what about you?
So with me, I thought it would be a breeze to get back into the workforce because I had like over 12 years of experience. It had all been in the same domain. And my gap was about 4 years. So I thought it was not too long. And even in that time, I had kept myself busy doing some relevant stuff, like I mentioned. Uh, but unfortunately, that was not the case because I made the mistake of going and looking at job boards for specific titles. And then I know I
It's
wish I
okay,
had
Deepthi.
been
We all do
sooner,
it. It's all
Gabby.
good. It's all good.
So I exactly knew I wanted to get back. I applied for Walmart as a senior product manager, which was the right role, right industry, right company, but of course did not get through. Neither did a multitude of other companies that I applied at. But finally, when I did get through the returnship, I did join Walmart as a senior product manager, which I thought was perfect, exactly what I wanted, right? Right company, right title, right role. But the nature of job wasn't what I thought it would be. So once I got and started looking at the job description, I all of my life have been on the application side of things, which is what I was hoping. But turns out I was placed in the infrastructure domain and had to be a product manager for technical products, which I had no experience whatsoever. And just the day-to-day skill set that was required for that role was not the right thing. However, the moral of the story is when you look at jobs, don't look at the title, look at the job description, look at what skill set you have and what is required for the job. And that's the way to go about it, right? Titles don't mean much. And when I got hired on at this role, it was as a product manager. But within the company, as I started networking, as I started applying what the returnship workshops taught us, right? It kind of opened doors within the company for me to kind of move. And I got hired on and my returnship got converted from a product manager to a senior product manager because I was able to display the skill set that I had and where I could bring value. And also because with the networking, the company kind of realized where my skill set would bring the most value for the company, where I could be a good value add. So I was able to make that transition as well. So like Alicia was saying earlier, it's about getting your foot in the door, making the most of the skill sets that you can bring to the table and showcase it, right? Mm-hmm. And that'll help you get to where you want.
Yeah, and Deepthi, it was funny. We got a comment from somebody about job boards and mentioned Dice, which is a great job board. I would say niche job boards are definitely much more helpful than the kind of sort of all everything job boards in particular industries. And by the way, I'm someone who's hired 2 people off a job board. So both Abby, our program manager, and Anna Comina, our marketing manager, came from idealist.org, which is a niche job board for the nonprofit sector. But it's important to note that in both cases, they were currently working in jobs that were similar to the job I was hiring for at organizations that were close enough to what Path Forward does. That I didn't need them to be recommended by somebody or passed to me by somebody because their background was the fit I was looking for. So I would say, people who are, maybe a few years out are going back to a job that is very, very similar to the one they had, you may find that job boards are very effective for you. My thing is about effectiveness at the end of the day. So if you're applying to a bunch of jobs on job boards and not getting interviews and not feeling like you're getting traction, that's a sign that maybe you want to take a different tack. If you're getting interviews, blast, keep doing whatever you're doing if you're getting in front of people and having good conversations. Abby, do we have another good question from the reg form?
So we do, but I realized before we do that, I think a poll question might actually inform where the audience is sitting. So I think right now, both Alicia and Deepthi are both so poised and able to tell these success stories. But I think the audience would love to know, what was it like while you were doing it, while you were in it, before you were at the end of the tunnel? What was that process like? How did you deal with setbacks? But first, I think let's just see where the audience is in terms of their current return to work status.
Cool. So hopefully you can see this poll on your screen. So what best describes your current return to work status? So the choices here are, I don't have a plan. I'm not sure where to start. I don't have a plan, but I'm making it up as I go. We love that. That can work for some people. I have a plan, but I feel stuck. I have a plan and I'm making some progress, and I have a plan and I'm right on track. So let us know where you think you fall on the spectrum of planning and getting yourself moving forward. We'll give people a minute for that while Deepthi and Alicia are thinking about their answer to how they felt when they were in the process, which is something I love to hear about also.
Yeah, I can tell you, Tammy, that it is a roller coaster ride. There are ups and downs, and now thinking back about it, it's easy to kind of look at the big picture and see how things fell into place, and then be able to translate it into words and share the experiences in a very polished, nice storytelling way. But when you are in that position at that point in time, it looks like sometimes you're in such deep bottoms of your emotional and even your family or work search, all of that. You feel like, oh my gosh, there's no getting out of this, right? And at the same time, when you get an interview, you feel like, oh yes, finally, I have this interview and I think I did great. I'm close to getting this offer. And then that does not translate, right? So you have your ups and downs through the journey, and it's hard to accept at that point in time, but that is a whole process that you have to go through, unfortunately, to get to the other end and be able to see light.
Yeah.
And if you're able to make that period of time, have that support system in place, whether it's from your family, whether it's from other people like you who are looking for jobs, having that support group helps a lot. And that's what I was able to find with like the whole returnship cohort, because other people were there like me who were going through that same emotional journey, same doubts and questions, and just being able to talk it out and have somebody help you reflect on it helps.
Yeah. So our poll found, so right a little fewer than half, 43% have a plan, but they feel stuck. So hopefully you're getting some good ideas today and things, even just new stuff to try. I don't know about anybody else, but for me, when I feel like I'm stuck trying to move something forward, just getting some ideas of new things to try and go give sort of a renewed energy. So hopefully you got that today. I'm very happy to hear there's 2 people who are right on track. Keep going, yay, go, go, go. But it's not unusual to be not sure what to do and not sure how to create a plan. So, so Alicia, talk a little bit about your experience being in it before you got to this wonderful place that you're in now.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it was a 16-and-a-half-month journey. So it was very transformative because I went from, full-time household manager to working in less than a year and a half after a long pause. So the most important part for me in relaunching my career was what I call the discernment phase. And this is a phase where you take time to really go within, be introspective, and think about what am I good at? What things am I good at? Where do maybe I struggle a bit? What are my values? What's very important to me in my life? Let me do some envisioning. What would the company look like that I work at? What would the office look like? How long would my commute be? What would my colleagues be like? What industry am I interested in? So I took time to do that, I attended workshops. I hired a career coach. I did lots of personality testing. So I did the Myers-Briggs. I did some other personality tests that were really valuable for me to comb through, because they were telling me about myself, and they were telling me what my strengths were, how I communicate with people, the best kind of, it's even suggested jobs that I look at. So I spent 6 months in the discernment phase, and I had wanted to go into corporate social responsibility. So I want to not only relaunch, but pivot into a different field. And I just really didn't get much traction there. I got to meet lots of people and learn about CSR work, but I didn't get that great traction. And a low for me was, I thought I had landed a job that was in a foundation, and it was my birthday weekend, so I was so excited because, you know, I said, yeah, we're working on the offer, and it was my birthday weekend, and I said goodbye to my the group that I was with to help relaunch. We would meet once a week. I said, bye, I'm going to start a job. And then on Monday, they emailed me and rescinded the offer. And I really cried. I felt depressed for a few days. So I went from this high, like, I did it, to just the rug pulled out from underneath me. And I was embarrassed to go back to my, like, I'll call like job support group. I was embarrassed because I said, I told you guys I had a job, and it fell through. And they helped me stand up, brush myself off, reassess. And then I decided, you know, I have over a decade in sales and marketing. Let me see how I can do program management there, because I think that'll be a bigger fit. So that discernment phase was really crucial, because when I arrived at the end of it, then I knew what to go for. I knew the type of jobs to look for, and it really expedited the process. So don't cheat yourself on that if you haven't really nailed down what's important to you, where you want to be, what you want to do.
Yeah. Alicia, that's great. One thing I noticed is a ton of stuff coming in on the chat about career changes and pivots and shifts. That is what we're going to cover on our next webinar. So definitely, if you're in that place where you're like, I'm not sure what to do, I don't know what's next for me, I'm not sure if I want to go back to what I did, try something different, definitely sign up for our July webinar. And although I think you've heard some stuff today that's actually, right, thinking about levels in different ways and thinking about backgrounds in different ways, but we'll cover that more next time. Abby, what's our next question?
So we have been getting a lot of questions that I'm curious, Alicia and Deepthi, if you have a perspective on. How did it feel to restart your career with people possibly younger than you, being possibly over you or equal to your position? We got a lot of questions about that. So Alicia, if you want to start, if you have any perspective on that.
Oh, I'll let Deepthi lead this one.
Got it.
I think with me personally, because my gap was around 4 years, I didn't see a whole ton of this. But I have been on the other end where I have had to interview folks who have had a large gap, and they were coming back at a much senior, right? I think what matters is that when there is an interviewee or you're having to work with other people, people are not looking at your age most of the time. They're looking at what you bring to the table, your personality, how you interact with them, right? And if all that comes across positively and they can see you as part of the team, I think the other factors kind of fade away.
Quickly for me, my hiring manager happened to be a couple of years older than me, so I was actually thrilled about that because I wasn't sure how I was going to be reporting somebody really young. But I ended up in the sales development department, and that's usually kids' first job out of college when they're getting into sales. So the guy sitting next to me was 19. And the average age in the department was, you know, in the early 20s. So I was surrounded by about 40, 20-year-olds. And I, instead of me thinking, oh my gosh, they could be my son, they're just a few years older than my son, I embraced it. They were friendly, they were warm. I taught them stuff, they taught me stuff. It was great. And they would say, hey, Alicia, you know, and I liked that energy. And I thought, let's not run from this. Let's take advantage of this and get that positive energy and learn how millennials are doing stuff, and even some Gen Zs.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Alicia. You know, I do think if it's a real concern, like, you know, the bigger and the older a company is, the more likely there's going to be other people. The younger and more startup-y the company is, the more likely people are going to be younger. And, you know, there's all kinds of variations there. But I think embracing that energy and what you can learn is super helpful. Yeah, I love that. And believe it or not, it's 2:30. Well, here in the, sorry, East Coast bias. It's 2:30 here. It's 11:30 out on the West Coast. By the way, I saw somebody in the chat mention they were in Brooklyn. I'm waving from my window. I'm in Queens. You're just across. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I know it's crazy with kids and homeschool and you know, people are taking care of parents, they're taking care of lots of things. We're doing lots of things. So for you to take an hour out of your day to come and spend time with us, it's really meaningful to me. Thank you for doing that. Alicia and Deepthi, thank you for taking time out of your, I know, extraordinarily busy days to come and share your wisdom with people. I think I personally find you inspiring. I hope the folks who are listening in today find you inspiring as well. But thank you, and anybody who signed up for today's webinar, you're going to get a link to the recording and and it will come with a handout that's got lots of great resources, including we'll include some links to Alicia and Deepthi's stories, so you can read more about them on our website. Keep on keeping on, and hopefully we'll see many of you in July. Thanks, everybody.